Here it is the next day, and the rain has actually kind of turned to snow and hail. But that was enough of a lull to allow me to go out and retrieve my parts chassis. So let's take a look at it. I actually did try watching the video I made of this way back when, and just didn't show enough detail. But it looked, definitely looked promising. So let's see if I can lift this out one-handed. Alright, so there is the power resistor, and looks like it might be okay. There's the tone switch, which I think is 2-position. So if I was to take this out and put it into that guy, it would actually be a bit of an upgrade. Also be a real Philco part, so think about that. As for the rest, I was planning on scrapping this anyway, because I just don't have anything to put it into, and it's already a little chewed up. So I think I'll clip out and save all the Philco branded capacitors in case I want to restuff something. Looks like this set has also had the volume and power switch replaced. I'm sure that was a common point of failure in these sets because it's the most used control other than tuning. And I'll save all the bakelite blocks and miscellaneous parts. A few spare tube shields, not that I really need any. So there's the tuning capacitor, IF cans. I don't need any of this stuff, so if anybody needs a tuning capacitor or IF cans, oscillator coil, antenna coil, so on, let me know. I am going to hang on to the power transformer though, because I very well may need that someday. Here are those two components clipped out of the chassis. So this certainly looks the part, but it's a little different. I didn't realize there was one more tap on it. And the resistances are a little off. So what the set's calling for is 32 ohms and 235 ohms. Between the two large taps I have 220, not 235. And if I go between these two taps I have 246. Between these two I've got about 20, and between this I've got a little over 40. So probably close enough if I go on any one of those combinations, but there's no way I can get quite right with what they asked for, unless I say go with these two, get 246, and add an external resistor in parallel to knock it down a little bit to 235, which leaves about 20 over here, and I'd have to add an external resistor in series to add about 12 ohms to it. I don't think these values are super critical. What I'm inclined to do is actually go with this on the low one. So instead of 20, I'll have around 40 something, and maybe put one in parallel with that to get 32. And then use 220 and place it through 235. Reason being is the percent difference between 220 and 235 is less than between 20 and 32. Now as for the tone control, here's one with the broken shaft, and here's the one I just took out. Obviously this one's much larger, and you can see it's got multiple positions. So in this position, neither capacitor is in circuit, and if you rotate this around it adds this capacitor, and then one more it adds this in parallel. I recall I worked on some radio that had the same type of setup. Maybe the 15DX, I'm not sure. I think this might just barely fit. Put it in there. You see it's pretty darn big. This comes close to poking out of the edge of the chassis. Inside, I think it would just clear the band switch. So I'll think about that. For now, I'm just going to leave the one I put in there. and focus on replacing that resistor down there. So here's what I want, and here's what I've got. It turns out that percentage-wise, the closest is to take the tap here. 246 is 5% higher than 235, and 21 is 34% lower than 32. However, I'd rather not be that much on the low side, because the whole point of this is current flows through here, there's a voltage drop across it, and these provide negative bias for the tubes. So if the resistor is 34% too low, you're going to have 34% less bias voltage developed across it. So what I'd rather do is go with this 6% too low and 47% too high, and then throw a resistor in parallel with these two to knock it down to 32. I did the math, turns out to be exactly 100 ohms, or 100.266 I think. Let's just call it 100. So I'll have 32 and 220, which is pretty darn close to that. Well, within 6% on that, the other one will be dead on. Here's the modified bias resistor installed. There is the 100 ohm resistor in parallel with these two contacts. It may look rather small, but it's actually a 2-watt resistor. They can make higher wattage resistors in rather small packages these days. I've also started applying some navel jelly here and there around the chassis to clean off the worst of the corrosion. And I've started unmounting the trimmer caps along the back one at a time so I can brush off all the dust and dirt that's accumulated on them. So as you can see, there's a metal plate here, metal plate on the back, and there's a sheet of mica in between, and there's a nut that you can tighten or loosen, which slightly changes the distance between the plates, which alters the capacitance slightly. That's how you align the radio. I'm all set to start stripping the Philco 60MB cabinet. I'm going to use this orange citrus strip, more just because I've got some left over I want to use up than any other reason. I could just as well use some lacquer thinner and acetone 50-50 mix and some steel wool. This old stuff just melts off quite easily. Here's the cabinet all stripped. After the citrus strip, I switched to something called antique refinisher, which is essentially lacquer and acetone, just pre-mixed in a can. Something else out of a can of that I wanted to get rid of. And the only thing I'm not particularly happy about is these spots are still here. I thought they would disappear when I stripped the cabinet, like the rest of it. It's in pretty good condition, but not those spots on top. Perhaps a little bit of sanding will take care of it. I'm not sure what that is. It kind of looks like, well, it's lighter. I mean, I don't know if some kind of bleaching agent got spilled onto this or what the deal is. But even so, it's not that noticeable. So I'll let this dry up a bit. Still has some fumes from all the solvents I used on it. I'm going to use a little bit more filler. I did fill in the nail hole during the stripping process. Some of that filler came out, especially there. And I also want to fill in this crack where the cabinet had split. And then there's a matter of grain filler. The only stuff I've got on hand is mahogany, which is darn near black, which on a cabinet like this is sitting on is great. Reddish mahogany, and you want that really dark filler to really make the grain pronounced. Not so much on this. The original ad says it had like a natural brown mahogany finish, and then all the trim is black. The only other grain filler I've got is walnut, which may work. Otherwise, there's a product called Crystal Lac, but there's only like 2 places I can find that sell it, and they really don't have anything else I want to order, and you got to buy it in quarts, which is something like $33, and it's just going to be far too much I need for this project, a little bit more than I'd like to spend on it. So that leaves a couple other options. One, I could use something like shellac and put on multiple coats and sand it, but I've done that before. I'm never going to do it again. It's way too much work. The other option is to use wood filler, just like kind of stuff I used on the nail holes. In particular, I've got some mahogany filler from p4o wood. And I was reading up on the difference between grain filler and wood filler, and it's kind of a fine line. Basic difference seems to be that grain filler is finer material. It's meant to go into these really fine pores. It's a thinner mix and a smaller particulate matter. Versus wood filler, like the kind of wood filler I used on this, it basically has like sawdust with a binding agent. Doesn't get into these holes too well. Anyways, the p4o wood's supposed to be kind of in between, and it can be used as a grain filler, so I might give that a try. And the color of it is basically sort of a reddish mahogany color. Well, I can't find my container of p4o wood. I think what may have happened is it had dried out and I tossed it, like I need to do with this can. See, these types of fillers are great in that they set up real fast, but that's because they have a lot of solvents in them. In fact, that's why the printing on this can is upside down. The lid's actually on the bottom. If you store it like this, which helps keep the solvents in, but even so, once you crack open these cans, solvent slowly seeps out and they turn rock hard and they're no good anymore. Alright, so I suppose I could buy a can of this plastic wood in mahogany. See, I can't get p4o wood locally. I had to order that, and I don't want to place an order just for that. Or I can go with this Elmer's wood filler, which is water-based, kind of like toothpaste. Either way, I'll figure something out.